learning, virtual learners. Welcome to another episode of Valenzuela Live in English 10. I am glad to be virtually with you again in this journey as you discover new lesson. Make yourself comfortable, prepare your learning packet, pen and paper for noting important details. For your attendance, just type or key in hashtag acronym of your school and your section. Please be reminded of the word respect because that is what we need as we go along our discussion. As we engage in our learning session today, we will be guided by this most essential learning competency. Compare and contrast the contents of the materials viewed with outside sources of information in terms of accessibility and effectiveness. Also, these will be our specific objectives. Use locational skills to gather information from primary and secondary sources of information, and get familiar with technical terms used in research. We will utilize the alternative delivery mode prepared by Mrs. Richelle S. Season, a master teacher from Bignay National High School, entitled Outsourcing, Paving the Road of Success Towards Factual Data. You may also ask questions after the discussion, and I would willingly answer them later in the question and answer part. But please make sure that you will only ask something which is relevant to our discussion. And be mindful of your choice of words. Are you ready? Great! Let's begin. Who among you loves solving puzzles or riddles? Well, I think we all love a good riddle once in a while because solving hard word searches on a regular basis can even enhance our problem-solving skills and logical thinking. It makes our brain cells go wild while trying to come with the answer, and when we do solve it, the feeling of accomplishment is more than gratifying. I have here a simple yet very satisfying hidden words puzzles for you to solve. All you have to do is find the words in the pictures I'll be showing you. And to make it easier, there are precisely 6 hidden words in the pictures. And they do relate to the themes of the drawings. I'll be giving you 30 seconds to look for the hidden word. Here's our first picture. Your 30 seconds start now. Time's up. Were you able to look for the words? Let's see if you found them. The 6 hidden words in this picture are book, story, words, pages, read, and novel. That's an easy one. Let's proceed to the next picture. 30 seconds start now. Time's up. The 6 hidden words are yummy, hungry, cheese, party, red, and music. Great job! Here's our last photo. You have 30 seconds to search for the words. Time's up! Learners, the 6 hidden words in this picture are couch, straw, mirror, tiles, cord, and cat. That's amazing! Did you have fun, learners? What does it feel when you are searching for something? While boosting your brain, problem-solving skills, and your spelling, doing word searches helps further improve language learning. It's a great way for people of all learning abilities to learn words, increase vocabulary, and make you feel smarter. Same thing goes when you conduct a research. Skeptical. This, I think, is one of the words to best describe us humans. Why? Simply because we tend to question the validity or authenticity of something that is said to be factual, or even the existence of something that arouses our curiosity. There are questions that bother our minds, and some of these can be answered through research. Research has been defined differently by different people. It is perhaps best understood through a clear description of its key characteristics. A few definitions are as follows. According to Walls and Bansell, research is a systematic, formal, rigorous, and precise process employed to gain solutions to problems or to discover and interpret new facts and relationships. Kothari claims that research is a pursuit of trust with the help of study, observation, comparison, and experiment, the search for knowledge through objective and systematic method of finding solutions to a problem. As per Python, research is the process of looking for a specific question in an organized, objective, and reliable way. When these definitions are consolidated, it can be said that research is the systematic activity directed towards objectively investigating specific problems in order to discover the relationship between and among variables. It seeks to answer specific questions, and to answer those questions, of course, you have to gather information. Information is a knowledge or fact learned especially about a certain topic or subject. Nowadays, it is evident that there is a great and urgent need for access and availability of information. In fact, scientists and scholars avail or use information to produce another document like research reports, theses, dissertations, books, journal articles, seminar paper, etc. These are some of the situations in which information plays an important role. First, the users of various professions and vocations like doctors, engineers, scientists, scholars, etc. acquire and apply information in order to do their job more effectively and efficiently. Information supports research in order to obtain effective and fruitful results. Information helps in better management of manpower, materials, production, finance, marketing, etc. Next, state-of-art kind of information of a subject helps in identifying the gaps or shortcomings in the subject field and to identify the research problems to be explored or undertaken. Information helps in avoiding the duplication of research. Information stimulates the thought process of the users, particularly the scholars. And information helps the scientists, engineers, scholars, etc. to get well informed with the current advancements in their subjects and to keep them up to date. But where can we get information? Right. There are many ways you can locate and access information sources. During the first episode, you would remember that Sir Noe enumerated the various sources of information. This time, let us try to recall them and classify whether they are considered primary or secondary sources of information. Sources of information are often categorized as primary, secondary, or tertiary material. But we will just focus on primary and secondary this time. These classifications are based on the originality of the material and the proximity of the source or origin. This informs the reader as to whether the author is reporting information that is first-hand or is conveying the experiences and opinions of others, which is considered second-hand. Determining if a source is primary or secondary can be crucial. So today, we will discuss the difference between the two. Let's begin with a primary source of information. A primary source is a first-hand or contemporary account of an event or topic. They are the most direct evidence of a time or event because they were created by people or things that were there at the time or event. These sources have not been modified by interpretation and offer original thought of new information. Primary sources are original materials regardless of format. Other characteristics of primary sources include the following. First, primary source is a first-hand evidence or eyewitness account of an event, circumstance, or personality. Anything first-hand is directly experienced. When you get information from someone who saw something happen or heard something said, that's first-hand evidence. And anything you see or hear yourself is also first-hand. Next, primary source tells about the event without adding any interpretation or commentary that may convey attitudes from a later time. Sources can be classified primary if it's authentic or original and have not been subjected to evaluation or assessment. These are original documents representing unfiltered ideas. Primary source reflects the individual viewpoint or bias of the participant or recorder. It is important when using anything as a primary source that the researcher be cognizant of and sensitive of the bias of the observer or analyzer that created the primary source, and also to the broader cultural biases of the era in which the primary source was created. Next, primary sources document events, people, and viewpoints of the time. A primary source is anything that gives you direct evidence about the people, events, or phenomena that you are researching. If you are researching the past, you cannot directly access it yourself. So you need primary sources that were produced at the time by participants or witnesses like letters, photographs, newspapers. If you are researching something current, your primary sources can either be qualitative or quantitative data that you collect yourself through interviews, surveys, experiments, or sources produced by people directly involved in the topic, like official documents or media texts. Primary sources are also used in various disciplines or research fields to describe source materials that is closest to the person, information, period, or idea being studied. In the field of history, these are the examples of primary sources. Personal texts like diaries, memoirs, letters, autobiographies usually make excellent primary sources because they were written by a historical person you are studying. Photographs and video footages are also considered primary source. They present a visual record of a moment in time and can enhance our understanding of events and moments by giving us a sense of what they looked like. Next, physical objects like artifacts are also under this type of source. Artifact is a man-made object that has some kind of cultural significance. And using this as a primary source, you've added material culture to your research or to anything you are studying about. This can be a very important complement to text-based primary sources, as artifacts provide a concrete, tangible dimension to your evidence. In the field of arts and literature, there are also various primary sources, and these include creative works such as novels and poems, paintings and art installations, films and performances. There are also primary sources under communication and social studies. Interview transcripts are considered primary source. They can add tremendously to your research project. They are most often used in the social sciences and can provide you with a huge amount of information that might not have been found elsewhere. When you conducted the interview yourself and concluded it as supporting evidence in your research paper, then the interview is definitely a primary source. Recordings of radio and other audio format broadcasts and speeches often present a window to important events, people, and movements throughout history. Thus, speeches as the first-hand product of the speaker are generally considered to be a primary source. Next, newspaper articles can provide a useful source, serving as a primary source of information about historical and current events. And social media posts can also be categorized as primary sources. Before, people wrote letters to each other and kept paper journals and diaries. But now, we write blogs and communicate each other via email, searching blogs and social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. As you should with all your research, be sure to evaluate social media resources or sources to make sure the information is authentic. Under the law and politics field, these are the examples of primary sources: court records, legal texts, and government documents. In the field of sciences, empirical studies and statistical data are some examples of primary sources. Secondary source, on the other hand, is anything that describes, interprets, evaluates, or analyzes information from primary sources. This contains organized, repacked knowledge rather than new knowledge. Details from these sources are modified, selected, and reorganized. Common examples of secondary sources include books, articles, and documentaries that synthesize information on a topic, synopses and descriptions of artistic works, encyclopedia and textbooks that summarize information and ideas, reviews and essays that evaluate or interpret something. Take note that when you cite a secondary source, it's usually not to analyze it directly. Instead, you'll probably test its arguments against new evidence or use its ideas to help formulate your own. To help you better understand the differences between the primary and secondary sources, let's have more examples. For primary, we have novel. But if the novel has been analyzed and an article about it was written, that's considered as secondary source. A painting is also one of the primary sources, while an exhibition catalog explaining the painting is then secondary. Letters and diaries written by a historical figure are also primary sources. On the other hand, a biography of the historical figure is a secondary one. An essay by a philosopher is under primary source, but a textbook summarizing the philosopher's ideas is secondary. Photographs taken during a historical event is primary, and a documentary about the historical event itself is secondary. Also, music recording is under primary source, yet an academic book about the musical style is secondary. Results of an opinion poll is another primary source, while a blog post interpreting the results of the poll is secondary. Last, as mentioned earlier, empirical study is an example of a primary source, but a literature review that cites the study is considered secondary. Now, how to tell if a source is primary or secondary? To determine if something can be used as a primary or secondary source in your research, there are some simple questions you can ask yourself. Does this source come from someone directly involved in the events I'm studying, or from another researcher? Am I interested in analyzing the source itself, or only using it for background information? Does the source provide original information, or does it comment upon information from other sources? Now that you already know the difference between primary and secondary source, you need to use some techniques to quickly gather the information you need: scanning, skimming, and scrolling. These techniques are important when we gather information primarily because sometimes we don't have enough time to read the entire text or because some parts of a text are not relevant or useful to your purpose. When we gather information, we only look for specific details, and we don't want to consume much time in searching for it. Scanning is used to search for key ideas, words, and phrases that give you clues in locating information. When scanning, you look only for a specific fact or piece of information without reading everything. For it to be successful, you need to understand how your material is structured as well as comprehend what you read so you can locate the specific information you need. Scanning also allows you to find details and other information in a hurry. If you were doing the research for an oral presentation, you could scan the index of books, websites, and reference materials. You would discover whether they contain any information you want and the pages where the information can be found. In scanning, you have a question in your mind and you read a passage only to find the answer, ignoring unrelated information. Moreover, scanning can also be helpful in the following activities: to search for a word in a dictionary or index, to find a phone number or an address in a directory, to check the time schedule of a program in an agenda, to check the price of a specific item in a catalog, and to know a particular information from a text. In the past, you probably scanned without knowing you were doing it. Just like what you did earlier in our activity, Find the Hidden Words, you scanned the picture to locate the words in it. Now, with the information provided in this section, you can use scanning more intentionally and frequently. The more you practice, the more effective scanning will become. What about skimming? This technique is used to identify the main ideas of what you are reading by disregarding the details and focusing on the topic and concluding sentences of the paragraphs, the illustrations accompanying the text, and the headings and subheadings. Skimming is simply the act of glancing through a text for gathering a basic idea about the text. For instance, if you want to read an interesting article on the newspaper and you do not have enough time to read more than one article, you will skim through most of the article to decide exactly which article you want to read. Skimming will also save a great amount of your valuable time if you know how to skim a text efficiently. Aside from that, skimming can also be helpful if you want to see what is in the news on a website or on a paper, look through a text to decide whether you want to read it or not, look through the television guide or program schedule to plan your evening, see through a catalog to choose an offer, or go through the options after searching something on Google. Remember this, learners. If you have sufficient background knowledge or believe you don't need the information, then skip it. That's right. Don't read it at all. Believe it or not, skipping material may sometimes be the best use of your time. Just because someone wrote something doesn't mean you have to read it. If you pick and choose carefully what you skim and skip, you will be pleasantly surprised at the large amount of information you can get through in a short period of time. Let's have the last technique, which is scrolling. Scrolling is used to move across an online page or from one to another. When searching online, you need to sync your scrolling with scanning and skimming to maximize the time used for your research. In using these techniques in gathering information, whether they are from primary or secondary source, be guided by the following characteristics of good information. First, availability or accessibility. Information should be easy to obtain or access whenever it is needed. Accuracy. Information should be precise or free from error. Reliability or objectivity. Information should be from a valid and trusted source with verifiable facts. Relevance or appropriateness. Information should fit to your purpose or goal. Completeness. Information should contain all the details needed. And conciseness. Information should be just enough. If you have questions or you want to clarify something about what has been discussed, you are free to type or key in your concerns in the comment box, and I will answer them as much as I can. A minute will be given for you to send your queries, and our teacher moderator will be gathering them. Your 1 minute starts now. Your time's up. I hope you were able to send your questions. Thank you so much to our teacher moderator who gathered them. If in case your question will not be addressed today, do not worry because it will be discussed by your English teacher on the follow-up discussion. So I will now start reading some of your questions and answer them as well. The first question is from Zenti De Leon National High School. What is the disadvantage of using primary source? We can say that primary sources of information are powerful for it provides original and first-hand facts. However, not all primary sources can be used by the researchers. If you found an article or a recording but the language is different from what you use, you won't be able to use the information mainly because you can't understand its content. When you rely solely on primary sources, you are also relying solely on your own knowledge and interpretation. That may not be sufficient in really extracting as much value as possible out of the original materials. Next question is from Kanumay National High School. What makes a secondary source valuable? Secondary source is essential in interpreting primary data. Yes, it is just an analysis of the original information, but it is also useful. Articles or information which have undergone interpretation and review contain accurate evidences. Besides, secondary articles like encyclopedia would provide concise meaning and up-to-date summary of essential topics. Thus, reliable secondary articles have vital information for preparing a scholarly article. Last question to be addressed is from Malanday National High School. Why is it important to evaluate sources of information before gathering details? There are different types of information and it is sometimes difficult to identify what you see on the screen or on the paper. Knowing the type of information you need or hoping to find will help in accessing the information and using it appropriately. Because not all information is reliable or true, evaluating its source first is important. You must be able to critically evaluate the appropriateness of all types of information sources prior to relying on the information itself. I hope I was able to address your queries. Thank you so much for sending us your questions. It just shows that you really listened to our discussion and you have learned a lot from our session today. Your participation throughout the discussion just proves that you are now ready to answer the activities on your ADM module. For additional concerns and clarification, your English teacher would accommodate you on your follow-up discussion. Evidently, nobody knows when this pandemic will end. But one thing is for sure, education is endless. Just like what the current Department of Education's battle cry says, anuman ang sitwasyon, tuloy ang edukasyon. This is Ma'am Ailina Crisostomo, your virtual teacher. Thank you for watching till our next virtual engagement.